Theodore Robert Cowell, the man, who would become known as Ted Bundy, was born on November 24, 1946, to his mother Louise Cowell and a man named Jack Worthington. At the age of 3, Ted Bundy's actions were already raising red flags. One of his aunts recalls Bundy doing bizarre things as a toddler, such as putting knives around her while she was asleep. Later in his life, Bundy also began to steal stuff to get what he needed, and this petty stealing became a habit that Ted continued into adulthood. Unknown to his friends and family, Ted Bundy had also carefully developed a facade of sanity. On the outside, he was endearing and articulate, and he knew exactly what to say and when to say it. Bundy was admired by many, but on the inside, he harbored an unquenchable bloodlust and craved the suffering of other people. And it was this twisted desire that eventually made him one of the most infamous serial killers in history. He is believed to have murdered 30 people, but the actual death toll is significantly higher, with some analysts believing it to be in the hundreds. Welcome to YARO Crime. Today, we'll be taking a look at the story of Ted Bundy and examining the life and crimes of this notorious serial killer. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Theodore Robert Cowell was born to Eleanor Louise Cowell on November 24, 1946, in Burlington, Vermont, at the Elizabeth Lund Home for Unwed Mothers. He was raised by his maternal grandparents and grew up thinking they were his real parents and that his birth mother was his older sister. He was made to believe this because his grandparents wanted to avoid the stigma of having a child out of wedlock. He would later discover the truth as he got older. Theodore, now known as Ted, and his mother moved from Philadelphia to Tacoma, Washington in 1950. There she met and married Johnny Bundy, and the couple went on to have 4 children. Details of Bundy's troubled youth vary. He provided contradictory versions in interviews, which frequently went against what other people witnessed. After completing his high school education at Woodrow Wilson in 1965, Bundy temporarily attended the University of Puget Sound before enrolling at the University of Washington. By 1968, he had dropped out of school and had begun working for political campaigns, and he was considered something of a rising star in the Washington, D.C. Republican Party. People expected him to be the next Ted Kennedy for the Republican Party. Around that time, his girlfriend, Diane Edwards, broke up with him due to his immaturity and lack of ambition, according to biographer Anne Rule. It was sometime around this period that he discovered that the woman he believed was his sister was actually his mother. Soon after, Ted began dating a single mother, Elizabeth Clifford. Their relationship would go on for the next 7 years. Elizabeth Clifford was a young mother who was just getting over a bad relationship. One evening, while in a pub, Elizabeth ran into a charming stranger. This stranger turned out to be no one else but Ted Bundy. The rest, they say, is history. In the 1970s, Ted returned to the University of Washington and earned a degree in psychology. He also participated in the Seattle Crime Prevention Advisory Committee and worked at a crisis center hotline during this time. Unknown to Elizabeth, Ted had started abusing her young daughter, Molly. He also began seeing Deanne again. Many of Ted's future victims, as well as Elizabeth, had comparable physical characteristics to Deanne. Bundy would disagree, however, stating that the only similarities between his victims were youth and beauty. Karen Sparks, a student at the University of Washington, was Bundy's first identified victim. This is despite the fact, however, that he might have begun murdering earlier. On January 4, 1974, while Karen slept, Ted viciously attacked her in her apartment. She managed to live, but the physical harm she sustained was irreversible. More female college students went missing in Washington and Oregon from January to June of 1974. Linda Ann Healy, Donna Gail Manson, Susan Elaine Rancourt, Roberta Kathleen Parks, Brenda Carroll Ball, and Georgian Hawkins. Bundy abducted 2 ladies from Lake Sammamish Park in Issaquah, Washington, on July 14th. With his arm in a sling, he approached several women and asked for assistance in unloading his boat from his Volkswagen Beetle. Janice Ann Ott agreed to help him. and Denise Marie Nussland followed suit later that day. This was the last time any of them was seen alive, and their bodies would not be discovered for months. Witnesses provided descriptions of Bundy and his vehicle, with one overhearing him introduce himself as Ted. This information helped the police release a composite sketch to the media. When she heard the news and saw the composite sketch, Elizabeth, Ted's longtime girlfriend, found the description strikingly similar to that of her seemingly perfect lover and reported him to the police, as did a University of Washington professor and co-worker at the Department of Emergency Services. The detectives were swamped with other leads, but because Bundy had no criminal record, he slipped under the radar. In August 1974, Bundy was admitted to the University of Utah Law School in Salt Lake City. Women began to go missing in the vicinity, including Nancy Wilcox, who went missing on October 2nd. Days later, University of Utah student Rhonda Stapley was assaulted after accepting a ride from Bundy. She was able to flee when he became distracted. Melissa Ann Smith, the daughter of a police chief, also went missing. Authorities discovered her body 9 days later in Summit Park. Laura Ann Aim went missing on Halloween, and her body was discovered a month later in the mountains. On November 8, 1974, Bundy approached 18-year-old Carol Daronch in a mall, pretending to be a police officer, warning her of an attempted auto break-in. She followed him, thinking they were headed to a police station. He pulled her over instead, and when he tried to handcuff her, she resisted and managed to escape. She then reported the event to the real police. Carol was the only one to ever escape from Ted. 4 hours later, Bundy kidnapped and murdered high school student Deborah Jean Kent. Elizabeth, who was still in a relationship with Bundy, contacted authorities twice. More with her suspicions. From January through April 1975, 3 women went missing in Colorado: Karen Campbell, Shirley Cunningham, and Denise Lynn Oliverson. In later interviews, Bundy admitted to kidnapping Lynette Culver from her junior high school in Pocatello, Idaho, drowning her in his hotel room in May, and dumping her body in a nearby river. Ted Bundy had returned to Utah by June 1975, and on June 28th, Susan Curtis vanished from Brigham Young University's. Bundy was driving through a peaceful residential neighborhood on the night of August 16th, apparently seeking his next victim, when Utah Highway Patrol officer Bob Hayward pulled him over and inspected his vehicle, discovering a disturbing combination of goods, including a ski mask and rope. Handcuffs, a crowbar, and an ice pick were also found. Hayward apprehended him, but there was insufficient evidence to hold him. But as the investigation continued, detectives questioned Elizabeth and discovered Campbell and Smith's hair in Bundy's car. On October 2, Carol identified Ted Bundy from a lineup. In February 1976, Bundy was tried for kidnapping her and sentenced to 1 to 15 years in Utah State Prison. In January 1977, Bundy was transferred to Aspen, Colorado, to be tried for Campbell's murder. As a former law student, he insisted on representing himself in court, and in turn was allowed library privileges. However, during a recess on June 7, an unsupervised and unshackled Bundy leaped from the second-story window of Colorado's Courthouse Library. About 6 days later, he was caught once again after being pulled over by cops. He actually stood a good chance of acquittal in trial, but instead plotted another escape. On the night of December 30th, Bundy escaped again after he squeezed his way through an opening in the ceiling of his jail cell, emerging in a jailer's apartment and changing out of his prison attire. In the early hours of January 15, 1978, Bundy broke into Florida State University's Chi Omega sorority residence and savagely attacked 4 sleeping students: Margaret Bauman, Lisa Levy, Kathy Kleiner, and Karen Chandler. While Kleiner and Chandler escaped, Bauman and Levy were killed, and Bundy departed the residence in search of another victim. He broke into Cheryl Thomas' apartment and attacked her, leaving her with lasting injuries. Kimberly Diane Leach, a little girl, went missing from Lake City Junior High School in February. She would be Bundy's last victim. Bundy was detained in Pensacola on February 15 while driving a stolen car loaded with stuff belonging to Florida State University students. He attacked the officer and attempted to flee, but was tackled to the ground. The trial for the Chi Omega attacks began in June 1979. Even though Bundy had multiple public defenders, he chose to represent himself once again. Many young women attended the trial, identified by the press as Bundy's groupies. He also allegedly received a considerable amount of fan mail. On July 24, 1979, Bundy was sentenced to death for the murders of Bauman and Levy. In January 1980, he received another death sentence for Leach. During the trial, Ted proposed to one of his girlfriends, Boone, who accepted and later gave birth to his daughter. Ted would receive a third death sentence in February 1980. Throughout the 1980s, Bundy had a variety of interviews with the media and law enforcement. He shared his opinions with the FBI on the Green River case. He also spoke with detectives from Oregon, Idaho, and Utah about several of his unnamed victims. Bundy admitted to all 8 Seattle killings, as well as 15 more in Oregon, Utah, and Colorado. Bundy admitted to FBI profiler Bill Heimmeyer the night before his execution that he murdered at least 30 young women and girls across 7 states. However, analysts close to the case believe the figure is far higher. He was only tried and convicted for 3 of the killings. Ted Bundy died in the electric chair on January 24, 1989. Thanks for watching. Let us know what you think about this case in the comments, and please do not forget to like and subscribe to stay up to date with our latest videos.